Let's go to Luke 23. Again, I've got about 2 weeks of seminar material to cover today. So you guys listened really fast last week, so I'm expecting you to listen fast again this week. So here's what I want you to see. And here's what I want you to think. I want you to stay in Luke, okay? Luke was written. We don't meet Luke until the second missionary journey, okay? Luke had no interaction with Jesus whatsoever. He meets Paul on the second missionary journey as he's going into Troas. We think Luke was a physician. That was not a glorified position that gets you a place in the country club, right, Rex? All right? Just because you're a physician doesn't, it was generally a slave who had been given some medical training, okay? So do not think of Luke as, driving a BMW, living in the country club, and doing all that thing, all right? He was generally a slave that would be assigned to a ship, okay? And so he would provide medical care for those people on the ship, okay? So again, don't think he's massively glorified thing. Luke wrote his gospel to a Gentile audience, okay? So he's not writing to Jewish people. So when you read Luke, you don't see all of the references to Scripture, okay? You don't read the Old Testament into it, all right? It's very much just sort of here's what a Gentile would learn. And they spent so much time in Corinth. I think there was a special connection. And Paul writes these words, and I'm going to leave this up on the screen because I want you to understand what today, the day of the cross, the Friday of the cross, this is what Paul, accompanied by Luke, everybody with me? Luke is his right hand. I don't know that Paul ever goes anywhere, second missionary journey on, without Luke right by his side, all right? He's a constant companion. Timothy goes here and there. He sends all the boys all over the place, but Luke is always right there with him, okay? And I think Luke hears this and hears this and hears this. So when he writes his gospel, this is the sort of the climactic moment of all he's been teaching all these people for who knows, 15, 20 years. He's been hearing this message. And Luke has heard Paul say these words. He made the one who did not know sin. All right, this idea, this knowledge of sin, this embodiment of sin, he made the one who did not know anything about sin to be sin for us, so that. It's an effectual clause, all right? I always say if you ever see a "so that" in the Bible, underline it, because something good is going to happen or something bad. Something's going to happen. There is an effect to this thing. And what I want you to hear today is when we talk about the day of the cross, when we talk about Friday, we're talking about what happened when he made the one who did not know sin to be sin for us, the ones who do know what it means to have sin. And that's what the day of the cross is. That's this whole thing. In Hebrews 9:28, it says, he was offered up for sin one time, but he's coming back in glory. And a lot of people think Luke wrote Hebrews. I disagree, but that's okay. They can be wrong, okay? Come on, y'all, lighten up, all right? We also have Philippians 2. What does it say? That he left all of his glory, emptied himself, taking on the form of a servant. And he died. He didn't just die, he died on a Roman cross. He died a crucifixion. Not grasping on to power, giving himself over. And for that reason, God has exalted him above every other name. So the name of Jesus, what might happen? Every knee will bow and every tongue will confess. And what I've been pleading with and what Ashley is pleading with you today is start today. Amen? Quit. Wait. Well, I'll do that when I get to heaven. I'll worship and all that stuff when I get to heaven. I'm not sure it's going to work out that way for you, to be real honest. Because the one who fails to worship on earth, I'm not sure you're going to be there to worship in heaven. So here's what I'm begging you today. Find the reason to worship today. Find the reason in the cross. And that's what I don't want to just say, you should do this because you're in church, and you should do this because you read the Bible and you want to do it and blah, blah. It's not all about this guilt trip of you should do this because you should. That's the last thing I want to do. What I want to do is convince you of you should do this because of that cross. And at the end of the day, you should be asking, is that all? Is that all? Is there anything more I can do? Is there anything more I can say? Is there anything more I can be? That's what my goal is. And that's where you have to get. And until you get to the point where you're saying, can I do more? What can I do more? That's when you become a worshiper. All right? So I'm going to leave this up because I want you to understand Friday is all about what he did when he made the one who did not know sin to be sin for us, for me. Now, the day starts off not in 23, but in 22. Look at the last sort of paragraph section of 22. It says at daylight, right? Yes? Everybody see that? At daylight? What do roosters do at daylight? Crow. And what happened when the rooster crowed? What had happened? What happened and then the rooster crowed? Peter denies Christ for the third time. Important? 3 times? Yeah, we'll see that a lot today, okay? So for the third time, Peter denies him, all right? And Jesus and Peter look at each other in that moment. How are you feeling if you're Peter in that moment with all the trash you've talked? And Jesus just looks at him. I think it was just the most empathetic, compassionate look anyone's ever seen. You know why? Because 5 seconds later, they're going to say, tell us, are you the Messiah? And Jesus knew full well, if he said yes, he would be committing blasphemy in their eyes right there on the witness stand. It's not that they convicted him of a crime that he had committed beforehand. When Jesus is sentenced by the Sanhedrin, it's because of what he just said in that moment. 5 seconds after Peter has said what? I don't even know him. So he says this. I think he takes a deep breath, knowing full well he could plead the fifth, but he doesn't. Why? Because what does Paul say? He demonstrated his love for Peter. And that while Peter had just denied him, Jesus died in his place. So Jesus literally steps up and says, yes, I am the Messiah. And they go, that's it. What more do we need? What more do we need to sentence him? And what do they want to do to him? They want to kill him, right? But they can't. Because about 20 years earlier, the Romans had removed that power from the Jewish people. And that's very convenient because all of the prophecies speak of Jesus dying in what fashion? Pierced. None of his bones were broken. What's going to happen if Jesus is stoned by the Jews? All the prophecies are out the window. See, God has been lining this whole thing up. This is not a surprise, and no one's caught off guard. Jesus is not trying to get out of this. How many times, when we looked at last week, how many opportunities did he have to escape? But no, he wanted to prove his love for you, in that while you were yet a sinner and I was a sinner, Christ died for me. Christ died in my place for me. So he made the one who did not know any sin to be sin for us, so that, we'll get to that in just a minute. So they march him off. They take him from the Sanhedrin to Pilate. Pilate's the governor, okay? And you can see picking up in 23, then the whole assembly rose up and brought him before Pilate. And they began to accuse him, saying, we found this man subverting our nation, opposing payment of taxes to Caesar, and saying that he himself is the Messiah, a king. Those are 3 charges, right? Did y'all catch them? Subverting our nation. It literally means to thoroughly turn our nation. We've seen kids go in high school and they start to hang out with the wrong crowd. And before we know it, what has happened to that kid? This kid went from this kid to being this kid. They have been thoroughly turned. Some translations say perverted. All right? I think that's a little pejorative. It doesn't really match. He's turning our nation, completely turning our nation. Politicians can do that, right? Has Jesus been doing that? Completely turning our nation, opposing taxes to Caesar. What happened like 3 days ago when they said, should we pay taxes to Caesar? Jesus says what? Give to Caesar what is Caesar and give to God what is God's. I mean, it's exactly the wrong thing. It's false testimony, which I think is one of the top 10 things that God said don't do. Pretty sure on that one, okay? And then saying himself that he's a Messiah. What has he said every time anyone has tried to claim that he was Messiah? Shh, shh. Finally, he accepts it at the triumphal entry. So they're making all these accusations. So Pilate asked him, "Are you king of the Jews?" Now, do you think this is a serious question? Is this a serious question? Are you king of the Jews? Because if you are, I may need to bow down to you, right? Is Pilate asking a serious question? No. And how does Jesus reply? Sure. You've said it. That's my translation, it's just sure. Because Jesus knows Pilate is not asking a serious question. So how does he respond? In kind. Because they're going, oh, he's this, he's this, and this. And Pilate goes, so are you king of the Jews? Like, seriously? A carpenter from Nazareth? Are you king of the Jews? He goes, yeah, sure. Because what's the next words? Look, Pilate then told the chief priests and the crowds, I find no grounds for charging this man. He just said he was the king of the Jews. But yet, how does Pilate treat that confession, that declaration? Please, I find no grounds for charging this man. I find no guilt in this man, no fault in this man, no reason for punishing this man. He is guiltless. Everybody with me? That's one. Okay? Keep up with it. But they kept insisting he stirs up the people, teaching throughout all Judea, from Galilee where he started, even to here. Now, what you got to hear is they are accusing him of being a rebel, because all rebels start in Galilee. Galilee's where it's where all the conspiracy theories take place. It's where all the bad people get together and go, ooh, let's destroy the Romans. And so the chief priests think they're lodging a complaint against him it's going to force Pilate to say, ooh, if he's from Galilee, he surely is a rebel. Kill him. But Pilate outsmarts him. He goes, oh, he's from Galilee? Huh, we have a tetrarch, which is sort of an official position over Galilee. I'm the governor over Judea, but we have a tetrarch who has jurisdiction over Galilee. And I'm getting out of this thing. I don't want to have anything to do with this. Send him to Herod. So Jesus is sent off to Herod. All right? Herod shows up. Herod's excited to see him because he's been wanting to see him forever. He wants to ask questions. He's like, oh, show me a sign, because Herod's just a horrible human being. All right? And he just wants to see something fun and a sign and whatever. And Jesus doesn't answer a bit. You know why? Because Herod's a clown. And Jesus is here to die for you and for me. Herod is utterly inconsequential. And Jesus treats him as such and says nothing. Herod's soldiers, they mock him. They put a lampress robe on him. It's a brilliant, it's ornate. It's maybe a good translation of this word. Put this robe on him and march him around and do all this stuff. And then finally just sends him on back. Why? Because they didn't say anything. Even though the chief priests are going, but he's doing this, but he's doing this. And Herod's like, no, show me a sign. Jesus is like, nah, this is a clown show. I'm just staying here. So they send him back to Pilate. All right, pick up here in 13. So Pilate called together the chief priests and the leaders and the people and said to them, you have brought me this man as one who subverts the people. But in fact, after examining him in your presence, I find no grounds to charge this man. How many is that? 2. With those things you accuse him of. Neither has Herod, because he sent him back to us. Clearly, he has done nothing to deserve death. Therefore, I will have him, and the translation here in the Holman is, I'll have him whipped and released. You may have disciplined. You may have something to that effect. It's more the idea of a disciplining. It's paideia, all right? Pedagogy, to train up a child, all right? This is the idea. I'm going to discipline him. I'm going to make him sure he doesn't do that, and then I'm going to release him. They can't have that, right? No. We can't have that, all right? 17, for according to the festival, he had to release someone to them, right? Now, you see that's in brackets, right? Remember what we said last week? If it's in brackets, it was not a part of the original authoritative manuscript. I don't want to say it wasn't a part of the original. It's not a part of the most authoritative manuscripts that we have. Okay? So you can't do a whole lot with that. Somebody needs to be released, and Pilate's thinking, here's my opportunity. I want to release this guy. Perfect. Let this guy go. Plus, I hate these chief priests and all this because they're just a pain to deal with all the time. All right? You should be recognizing a little bit of rivalry here between Pilate and the chief priests. They're playing each other. The chief priests don't like Pilate, and Pilate doesn't like them. And Jesus is the pawn in the middle of this little game. Okay? So 18, then they all cried out together, take this man away. Release Barabbas to us. That threw Pilate. You need to understand this. That threw Pilate. Okay? He's like, what? What? You got a little meek, mild Jesus of Nazareth, hadn't hurt a fly, literally hadn't hurt a fly in his life. And you've got Barabbas. How do we describe Barabbas? He was a murderer in the midst of a what? Rebellion. How does the Jewish law handle murder? Is there anything worse you can do? Human to human. Absolute, the worst crime. What's the penalty for murder? Death. No questions asked. This is the worst thing you can do. If you're a citizen, a subject of Rome, what's the worst thing you can do in the eyes of Rome? Rebellion. I want you to understand, when Jesus is going to step into the place of someone else, God says, I don't want a jaywalker. I don't want some guy that stole a piece of gum. I'm going to put a murderer up there. So in the eyes of the Jewish people, there's no one worse. And I'm going to make him a murderer in the midst of a rebellion so that everybody in the Roman world knows this. There's nothing worse. So for any of you sitting out there thinking, well, Jesus would never take my place. You don't know what I've done. Don't you love that God gave us Barabbas, the worst of the worst, to say, oh no, I can handle this. I can step into your place. I can replace you. Why? Because he made the one who did not know sin to be sin for Barabbas. The worst of the worst. Don't ever question God's ability to save you. Ever. He saved Barabbas. He stepped into Barabbas is the one person in history who literally knows exactly what this verse means. I mean, on a physical scale, the cross Jesus was crucified on was supposed to be Barabbas' cross. And yet he made the one who did not know sin to be sin that day for Barabbas. 22. Luke even points this out a third time. See, even Luke sees it, all right? A third time he said to them, why? What has this man done wrong? I've found no grounds for the death penalty. Therefore, I'll have him whipped and then released. But they kept up the pressure, demanding with loud voices that he be crucified. And their voices won out. So Pilate decided to grant their demand and release the one they were asking for, who had been thrown into prison for rebellion and murder. But he handed Jesus over to their will. Ouch. Now, if you want to understand why Pilate is being manipulated so easily by these people that he could easily have executed, just for the fun of it, you need to go look up the story of a man named Sejanus, Sejanus. All right? I'll leave it at that. He was not a good dude, and Pilate was his buddy. And if anybody went back to Caesar and connected Sejanus with Pilate, Pilate would have been executed immediately. All right, look up the story. I don't have time to go into it too much today. So 26. As they led him away, they seized Simon, a Cyrenian, a Libyan, okay, who was coming in from the country, and laid the cross on him to carry behind Jesus. Here's my question. Whose cross? Whose cross was Simon the Cyrenian carrying that day? Jesus' cross? Was Simon carrying Jesus' cross? Or was Simon carrying Simon's cross? Who was guilty? Who knew sin and who did not know any sin? Who is the guiltless one? In fact, 3 times I find no grounds for charging this man. Is it Jesus' cross? It was Barabbas' cross, but wasn't it Simon's? Wasn't Simon carrying his own cross that day? You will never even start to worship until you recognize that cross was my cross. And that cross was your cross. And when you figure that out, when you know that beyond a shadow of a doubt, now you'll become a worshiper. Up until that point, you're just going to be somebody that walks in a building. Find this motivation. Find and recognize this is your cross, because he made the one who did not know sin to be sin for you, to die on your cross. And you will become a worshiper when you get that. A large crowd of people followed him, including women who were mourning and lamenting him. But turning to them, Jesus says, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. Look, the days are coming when they will say, the women without children, the wombs that never bore, and the breasts that never nursed are fortunate." This is all found in that Olivet discourse of there's destruction coming. 30, then they will begin to say to the mountains, fall on us, and the hills cover us. For if they do these things when the wood is green, what will happen when it is dry? There is desolation coming to Jerusalem. It's coming in 70, and I believe it's coming again someday soon. 32, 2 other criminals were also led away to be executed with him. What word do you have for criminals? Thieves? Do you have thief? Anybody have malefactors? You're rocking the old King James. You got malefactor, right? Is that it? What you got, Shannon? All right. This is the word kakos, ergon. Kakos, we've said many times. You're just a horrible human being. You're mean. You're ugly. You just complain about everything. You're just a horrible human being. Kakos. Kakos and ergon. Ergon means to do work. All right? So a kakos ergon. These are people who are just working at being horrible. This is the extent of their life. And they're being crucified. You know why? Because they're horrible people. All right? And what should happen to horrible people? They should be crucified, right? You're lucky we have an 8th Amendment around here. Right? We'd be taking people out right and left, all right? No, but I want you to get a feel for who these people are. They've never once done a good thing in their entire life. And they are being crucified with him, right and on his left. How is Jesus being categorized? He made the one who did not know sin to become sin, to be crucified in between 2 people. What's the identification? Kakos ergon, therefore kakos ergon. He became kakos. He became sin for us. For us. When they arrived at the place of the skull, they crucified him. What are the details we get of the crucifixion here in Luke? The doctor. What are the physical details we get? They crucified him. Stop being sensationalized by things you don't need. Everybody with me? Nobody cares how heavy the cross was. Nobody. I don't need that. I don't care what shape it was. I don't care how rough it was. I don't care anything about it. In fact, did anybody notice that we don't even have a flogging story in Luke? Do you need Jesus to be flogged to understand the depth of his love for you? I don't. Don't be sensationalized by this physical evidence. Be sensationalized that he made the one who did not know sin to be sin for you. That should sensationalize all you need. They crucified him there along with the criminals, one on the right, one on the left. 34, in brackets, careful. Then Jesus said, Father, forgive them because they do not know what they are doing. Not in the most authoritative manuscripts. A lot of people think later on Stephen's going to die and he's going to say something very similar to this. And they said, well, if Stephen said something like this, surely Jesus must have said something like this as well. So they maybe added that little feature. We don't know, all right? Later manuscripts are going to add it. Again, it's kind of one of those things of, it may be in the story. Let's just leave it in there, but we'll put brackets around it. But we can't do a whole lot with it, okay? Don't go too far with that, all right? And they divided his clothes and cast lots. Here's what I love about this, and John brings the story out a little more, because John talks about the seamless garment that he was wearing that they didn't want to tear up, but they gambled for it so that one person walked away with it. And here's what I love. A Roman soldier walked away from the cross clothed in what? The garment of Christ. How often does Paul talk about being clothed in righteousness? Put on the new garments. Put on righteousness. And this soldier walks away clothed in the garment of Christ. You can't just sort of say that was a coincidence. What was God trying to show? What was God trying to point out? They divided his clothes so that somebody could walk away clothed in the garment of Christ. Why? Because he made the one who did not know sin to be sin for us, so that I might walk away clothed in the righteousness of Christ. So that when God looks at me, what does he see? Does he see my old tattered garments, or does he see what? The garment of righteousness of Christ. I'm telling you, you just can't make this stuff up, guys. The people stood watching, and even the leaders were scoffing. He saved others. Let him save himself if this is God's Messiah, the chosen one. And the soldiers mocked him, and they came and offered him sour wine and said, if you're the king of the Jews, save yourself. And an inscription was above him that said, this is the King of the Jews. That was Pilate taking a little shot at the Jewish leaders. Because what do they immediately do? Don't write that. Write that he said he was King of the Jews. And Pilate said, you know what? I wrote what I wrote. What are you going to do about it? And guess what? Most Jewish people are still resisting that sign to this day. You know why? Because most Christians don't live like it's true. So why would the Jewish people believe Christians who don't really live like it's true? Just a question. Then one of the criminals hanging there began to yell insults at him. Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us. But there was two, right? But the other answered, we think his name was Dismas, D-Y-S-M-A-S. That's legend has it. His name was Dismas. But the other answered, rebuking him, don't you even fear God since you are undergoing the same punishment? We are punished justly, righteously, according to what we deserve, all right? He was made to know sin, even though he had not sinned. This is unjust what's going on. We receive it justly because we're getting back what we deserve for the things we did. But this man has done nothing wrong. Go back to all the sacrifices. What did it say? An unblemished lamb. And over and over and over again, what's being affirmed? What's being affirmed in Luke's writing to the Corinthians, to the Philippians, to all these people that have heard Paul talk about how he made the one who did not know sin, the guiltless one. We'll look at a lot of these examples next week. He made him who's done nothing wrong to be sin for us. Then he said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. What's he affirming? Jesus has a kingdom. He ain't just some criminal. He's stepping into a faith in this Jesus. And what's his request? Just remember me. How humble is that? How simple is that? Did he list off all the things he's done right and wrong? Jesus, I did this and I did this and I did this and I did this. Why? Because what's he going to say? How is he described? You're a kakos ergon. You're a horrible human being, and that's who you are and what you do. And at the cross, 5 minutes before he died, I don't know, maybe 5 hours, whatever it was, he says what? Remember me. I had a gentleman when I was in a fraternity, and he was speaking to us, and it was a pretty cool moment in our fraternity. We had a good fraternity. And he said, and I forget the context, but he said, you know what, gentlemen, he said, I don't believe in deathbed conversions. I believe you have to demonstrate your faith. You have to prove that you're a Christian before God's going to let you in. And if you know me at all, even at 19, I'm pretty much the same person, all right? Anybody think I just sat there and took that? No, I went, what about the thief on the cross? And everybody kind of looked at me and went, ooh, did he go there? Yeah, I did. You know why? Because the thief on the cross is the only person in all the scriptures that is told, you are going to heaven. And show me one good thing he did in life, other than utter the words, remember me. And you see, the one who did not know sin became sin so that he could hear those words of the last person that Jesus would ever hear with his own ears say, remember me. And he says, today, my friend, you will be with me in paradise. You will walk with me in the garden of God as my friend. That's a cool moment right there. And it doesn't come because of your morality or your ethic. It becomes because of the mercy and grace of God who proved his love for you. In that while he was a sinner, while Dismas was the horrible human being that he was, in the moment he turned to Christ, Christ said, welcome, my friend. Come into my garden, into my paradise forever and ever. And that's all he's waiting for you to do. Keep going. That was good, but let's keep going. It was now about noon, and darkness came over the whole land until 3 hours of darkness. The 9th plague, 3 days of darkness. Correlation? I don't know. Because the sun's light failed. The curtain of the sanctuary was split down the middle. Now, we're not talking about just like a little drape somewhere. When we talk about a curtain, we're talking about 75 feet high. Some people say it was 4 inches thick. Any of y'all's drapes 4 inches thick? That's a serious curtain right there, all right? And it schismed down the middle, all right? One of the other gospels said it tore from the top to the bottom, 75 feet up, just you imagine standing there in the temple and you're in the most holy place and you're doing something with bread and candlesticks and whatever, and all of a sudden, I didn't do anything, man. I didn't do it. It wasn't me, all right? But why does it tear? What was the symbolism? What's behind the curtain? This is the Holy of Holies. It's where the Ark of the Covenant should be. It's not there, right? We lost it in the Babylonian captivity. But what does this open up? It opens up so that I can do what? I can step into. Not I can believe in my ability to go to God. No, I can step into it now because the curtain has been torn. The way has been opened up to me. I can now go into. I can believe into, not just believe in. The church has got to stop believing in something, and we have to start believing into something. Dismas doesn't sit there on the cross and go, I'm just going to believe and not say anything. See, that's what it means to believe in. When you believe into something, you say, hey, quit. Stop talking about him that way. Don't you understand? Don't you understand we are receiving justice and he's not? Jesus, remember me. He goes, dude, you stepped into both feet. Welcome. Come on in. You're my friend. And this curtain was split so that you too could step into something and not just academically, theologically understand and nod and believe in something. Because the only way you're going to affect this community is when you believe into it. And you activate in it. You're going to see this a couple of times here. And Jesus, 46, and Jesus cried out in a loud voice, Father, into your hands I entrust my spirit. And saying this, He breathed his last. He exhaled and never inhaled again. And here's the question. Have you entrusted? Have you said, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit? Have you made that commitment? Not, I believe in you. I believe in Christianity. I believe in those things. No. I want to believe into it. I like to compare it to sitting on the dock and getting in the shark cage. That freaks Ashley out. She would just have a heart attack if she ever got into a shark cage. But no, there's people that will sit on the sidelines, on the dock, and go, yeah, I believe that shark cage will save you. And then there are people that get into the shark cage and go into the water. The thief on the cross stepped into the water. He stepped into the cage. He got into the fight. The centurion. When the centurion saw what happened, he began to glorify God, saying, this man really was righteous. The one who did not know sin, the one who was righteous. The centurion says this out loud where people could hear him. How good of a career move is this going to be? You're a Roman centurion, you're executing a person, and you stand back and go, this person was absolutely righteous. You're glorifying God, according to Luke's gospel, saying this person was righteous. We were wrong to execute him. We were wrong to crucify him. How's that going to work out for you? You want to say believing into? Now it may cost you something. That centurion could have easily just sat over there going, I guess he was righteous, and never said a word. And we would be utterly deprived of the example of someone stepping into the faith in Christ. 48. And all the crowd that had gathered for the spectacle, theater, literally is the word we get our word theater, when they saw this had taken place, went home striking their chests. Deep regret. But all who knew him, including the women who had followed him from Galilee, stood at a distance watching these things. There was a good and righteous man named Joseph, excellent name right there, a member of the Sanhedrin, who had not agreed with their plan and action, in spite of this statement that the whole assembly had delivered him over. He was from Arimathea, a Judean town, and was looking forward to the kingdom of God. He approached Pilate and asked for Jesus' body. Good move, bad move. You're a wealthy man in the city, a member of the Sanhedrin, and you go to Pilate and you say, I would like to have the body of the person you crucified on the behalf of the chief priests. Good move, bad move. Dangerous? Temporally. Eternally? Absolute worship. You know why? Because Joseph doesn't just sit over here believing in Jesus. He does what? Believes into Jesus. This is the identification of his life now. You get this? However long he's going to live, who is he going to be? He's going to be that guy that asked for Jesus' body. You know why? Because he stepped into it, not just sitting on the sidelines believing in it. Is your life marked that way? Do people even know you're a Christian? Don't wait. Don't wait till you get to heaven to start worshiping God. My goodness. He made the one who did not know sin to be sin for us. Why? So that what? So that what? So that we might become the righteousness of God in him. That's the possibility for us. And let me say this, if you're not the righteousness of God, you will spend eternity separated from God in hell. There are only two options at the end of the day. At the judgment, there are two options. You will spend eternity in this paradise that Jesus welcomed Dismas, or you will spend this eternity in hell, separated from God, because you chose it, because you chose this path. You see, all we need is the righteous God in him. Because what do we see? He approaches him, he gets the body, and then the last sentence in Luke 23, and they rested on the Sabbath according to the commandment. And you know what? So did Jesus. You know why? Because it was finished. The one who did not know sin became sin for you, so that what? So that you might become the righteousness of God in him. And Jesus rested. Because just as God finished creation and rested, so did Christ finish the recreating of humanity. So step into this. Don't stand on the sideline and go, yeah, I believe that, I believe that, I believe that. I don't really do anything about it. It has really no impact on my life. I don't express it in any way, shape, or form. It's really inconsequential to the way I live my life. But I believe it. I believe it, and if you ask me about it, I'll tell you I believe in it. And God is so bored with believers like that. Believe into. Father, into your hands I entrust my spirit. Don't wait till you die to say that. Do not wait until you die to say those words. Start today. Reaffirm today. Father, into your hands I entrust my spirit right here, right now, again. Because I want to worship you. Because very simply, you made the one who did not know sin to be sin for me so that I could be righteous in your eyes. So I could spend eternity in your presence as your friend. How do you get in him? If I become the righteousness of God in him, how do I get in him? Real simple start. Just say thank you. Just say thank you. Affirm what he's done. Say thank you. Thanking him for what he has done for you. That's a beautiful life. Let's pray. Father, man, may we get and understand and know the power and the meaning and the beauty of your cross. May we understand the love that was proved that day. May we understand the grace that was freely given. May we understand the mercy that was extended to us. And Father, may you ruin and wreck this life that we have planned out and schemed out. And may we step into the romance of being